16 years dedicated to being a single mother. 16 years fighting to give my daughter Julia the best. And it was precisely on her wedding day that I heard her future husband tell his friends, "Marrying that filthy pig is the price to get my hands on that fortune." At that moment, something broke inside me. I decided he would never see a cent of what I had built, even if it destroyed my only daughter's dream of a perfect wedding. The clock struck 10:13 a.m. when I finished arranging my bridesmaid's dress. Julia would be getting married in less than 5 hours, and everything needed to be impeccable. 16 years as a single mother taught me to pay attention to details. I had saved every penny to give my only daughter the wedding of her dreams. The hotel was luxurious, though modest by Leonardo, the groom's standards. He came from a wealthy family that had recently faced financial problems. I never mentioned it to Julia, but I noticed how his interest increased after our small confectionery business started to take off. In 3 years, we went from an improvised kitchen to one of the largest distributors of fine sweets in the Guadalajara region. "Mom, can you get my bouquet from the bridal prep room? I forgot it there when I went to give him his gift," Julia asked as the makeup artist finished her work. I nodded with a smile. My daughter was radiant, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She always dreamed of a fairy tale, and I wanted to believe she had found her prince. I walked down the hotel corridor trying not to wrinkle my dress. The ballroom was already being decorated with white and gold flower arrangements that I had chosen myself. I approached the room where Leonardo and his groomsmen were getting ready. The door was ajar, and I heard male laughter. I was about to knock when I heard Leonardo's voice, clear and mocking. "It's only a few more hours, fellows. Then I'll sign those partnership papers, get my hands on her confectionery, and that's it. Marrying that filthy pig is a small price to pay to recover what my father lost in business." I froze. My legs gave out, and my heart seemed to stop. Instinctively, I moved away from the door, leaning against the wall to keep from falling. "But you'll have to sleep with her, man," said a voice I recognized as Bruno's, his best friend. "Nothing a bottle of tequila can't solve," Leonardo replied, laughing. "She's so pathetic she believes me when I say I love her. And her mother, that old idiot working day and night in that confectionery. She has no idea that in 6 months we'll sell everything and she'll go back to the neighborhood she never should have left." The laughter grew louder. I felt my blood boil in my veins. Breathing became difficult. My vision darkened for an instant, and I had to control myself not to burst into that room. "And when she starts crying about anything, she looks like a beached whale," Leonardo continued mercilessly. I couldn't take it anymore. With trembling hands and a broken heart, I walked away in silence. I returned to the room where Julia was getting ready, without the bouquet. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just heard. How would I tell Julia? Would she believe me, or would she think I was trying to sabotage the wedding? "Mom, are you okay? What about the bouquet?" Julia asked, noticing my expression. "It was closed. I'll ask for the key." I lied, trying to buy time. I went out again, closed the door, and leaned my forehead against the cold wood. Silent tears ran down my face. I needed to make a decision, and fast. I took out my cell phone and called Antonio, my accountant and friend of many years. "Antonio, I need you to come immediately to Hotel Las Palmas and bring those contingency documents we prepared last year. Yes, the emergency ones. No, I can't explain now. It's urgent." He agreed without asking questions. Then I called my lawyer. If Leonardo thought he would get his hands on what I built with sweat and tears, he was very mistaken. As a mother, I had 2 equally painful options: destroy my daughter's wedding dream by revealing the truth, or let her fall into the trap of a man who only wanted to use her. Antonio arrived in record time, carrying a black briefcase. We met in the hotel lobby in a discreet corner near the emergency stairs. "Regina, what happened?" he asked, concerned. I told him everything I had heard, every filthy word that came out of Leonardo's mouth. Antonio paled, and I saw anger grow in his eyes. "That miserable man," he murmured. "What are we going to do?" "Implement the contingency plan, now. Not later, not tomorrow, now." The plan was something we had prepared when we started expanding the business, a way to protect the company in case something happened to me. I never imagined we would use it to prevent a scheming son-in-law from taking control of everything. In 2 hours, Julia Sweet's bakery no longer belonged to me, but to a holding company I controlled. Any significant financial decision would need my signature and at least 2 of the administrators I appointed, Antonio and my sister Marisa. Julia would remain a beneficiary and receive her allowance, but she could not sell, transfer, or use the company as collateral for loans. Most importantly, her future husband would have no rights over the business, regardless of the marital property regime chosen. When I entered the room, Julia was alone, already dressed and ready. She looked like a princess in her white dress, the delicate veil framing her face. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile disappeared when she saw my expression. "Mom, what's wrong? Did something happen?" I sat beside her, holding her hands. "Julia, my love, I need to tell you something very difficult." I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I told her everything, every cruel word, every mocking laugh. As I spoke, I watched her face transform. First incredulity, then confusion, and finally a pain so profound I thought my heart would break along with hers. "No," she shook her head, letting go of my hands. "He wouldn't do that. You must have misheard." "Daughter, I know it's hard to believe, but..." "No, Mom," her voice rose. "You never liked him. You always thought he was with me for money." "Julia, I heard it with my own ears." I insisted, keeping calm. "He called you horrible things. He said marrying you was a small price to pay to get his hands on the bakery." Tears began to stream down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Why are you doing this today, of all days?" She stood up, moving away from me. "Because I love you, daughter, and I'd rather you hate me now than discover the truth when it's too late." Julia picked up her cell phone. "I want to talk to him. I'll ask him directly." "Julia, he'll deny it. It's my wedding," she cried, something rare for her. My daughter had always been sweet and controlled. My life, I decide what to do. She was right. It was her life, her choice. I had done my part by protecting the assets and telling her the truth. The rest was in her hands. "All right," I conceded, "but first I want you to know something." I handed her a copy of the documents I had signed with Antonio. "What is this?" "I transferred the bakery to a holding company. You will continue to receive your allowance, but neither you nor Leonardo will be able to sell or use the company as collateral. It's a protective measure I took today after what I heard." Julia leafed through the papers, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. "You did this without consulting me? How could you?" "It was necessary. If I'm wrong, it won't make a difference. But if I'm right..." I left the sentence hanging. She stared at me for a long moment, silent tears streaming down her face. Then she called Leonardo. "Leo, I need to talk to you now. It's urgent. Come to my room." After hanging up, she turned to me. "I want you to stay, Mom. I want you to hear what he has to say." A few minutes later, someone knocked on the door. Leonardo entered with that charming smile that had so enchanted my daughter. He wore an impeccable suit, hair slicked back, the perfect image of an eager groom. His smile faltered when he saw me there. "Darling, what's wrong? You shouldn't be getting ready for..." He stopped when he noticed the tears on her face. "What happened? Why are you crying?" Julia took a deep breath, wiping away her tears. "I need to ask you a question, Leo, and I want you to be completely honest. Are you marrying me for love or for the bakery's money?" The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Leonardo's face go through several emotions in seconds: surprise, confusion, calculation, and finally, a mask of indignation. "What kind of question is that?" He approached, trying to take her hands. "Of course I'm marrying for love. Where did you get that idea?" Julia pulled away, keeping her distance. "My mother overheard you in the living room with the best men. You said you called me a filthy pig, that marrying me was just a small price to pay to get your hands on the bakery." Leonardo looked at me angrily, then forced a laugh. "And you believed it, Julia? Your mother never liked me. She's making this up to separate us." "I'm not making anything up," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "I heard every word you said, Leonardo." "Prove it," he challenged me, crossing his arms. "It's your word against mine." That's when I remembered my cell phone. After hearing the initial conversation, I had gone back to the hallway and recorded part of the conversation while they continued talking. I didn't even remember that detail myself, acting on instinct in that moment of shock. I picked up the device and accessed the recordings. There it was. I pressed play. So pathetic that she believes me when I say I love her. And her mother, that old idiot working day and night in that bakery, she has no idea that in 6 months we'll sell everything and she'll go back to the neighborhood she should never have left. Leonardo's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable, followed by laughter. And when she starts crying about anything, she looks like a beached whale. I stopped the recording. Julia's face was pale, her eyes fixed on Leonardo, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Julia, I can explain," he began, but she raised her hand, cutting him off. "Explain what exactly? How you plan to use me and then discard me? How you laughed at me with your friends? They were just stupid jokes. The guys were teasing me. I drank too much." He tried to approach her again, but Julia recoiled. "Don't touch me." Her voice was ice. "Were you really going to sell the bakery? Everything my mother built? Everything we worked for?" Leonardo looked at me, then at her, and his face transformed. The mask fell, revealing the coldness I had always suspected existed behind the charm. "What's the problem? That bakery could be worth millions in the right hands. You two are so sentimental, attached to that place as if it were something special." "It is special," Julia cried, pain giving way to anger. "It's my mother's life. It's my life." "Oh, please," Leonardo rolled his eyes. "You could have so much more. I was going to give you a life you can't even imagine with my family's money. What's the difference? Money is money." Julia picked up the documents I had given her and threw them at his chest. "Read this. My mother transferred everything to a holding company. You will never touch a cent of our money." Leonardo picked up the papers, reading quickly. I saw his face go from contempt to understanding, then to shock. He looked at me furiously. "You can't do that." "I already did," I replied simply. He crumpled the papers and threw them on the floor. "This won't stand. I have friends, lawyers. I'll contest it." "You can try," I challenged him, "but it will be hard to explain to the judge why you deserve access to my family's assets after this recording." His anger turned into calculation, always the strategist. Leonardo turned to Julia, softening his expression. "Darling, let's talk in private. Your mother is putting things in your head. What you heard, I can explain. They were silly jokes. I'm nervous about the wedding. I said stupid things to impress those idiots." Julia looked at him for a long moment. I saw her hands tremble, her chest rising and falling with irregular breathing. I feared she would give in, that love would blind her again. "Get out of my room," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Julia, please, get out," she screamed, throwing a vase at him. The object shattered against the wall, water and flowers scattering across the floor. Leonardo recoiled, surprised by the outburst. He looked at me with pure hatred, then back at her. "You'll regret this," he threatened. "Both of you will regret it." Then he left, slamming the door. When we were alone, Julia collapsed to the floor, sobbing. I rushed to hug her, holding her as her body trembled with tears. "My girl, my baby, my heart." Seeing her suffer like this was like my soul was being torn apart. "I loved him so much, Mom," she cried. "How could he? How didn't I notice?" "He was good at lying, daughter," I whispered, rocking her like when she was little. "And you are good at seeing the best in people." For almost half an hour, we stayed like that, on the floor of that hotel room, with a 15,000 reals wedding dress spread around us, crushed bouquet flowers, smudged makeup, shattered dreams. When the crying finally subsided, Julia lifted her swollen face. "What are we going to do now? There are 200 people waiting for a wedding downstairs." "We'll cancel," I replied pragmatically. "It happens. People will talk for a few weeks, then they'll forget." But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Leonardo didn't seem like the type of man who would accept defeat easily. The morning after the canceled wedding, I woke up to the insistent ringing of the phone. It was Antonio, his voice tense. "Regina, have you seen the internet today?" "No, I just woke up. Why?" "Leonardo is posting terrible things about you and Julia. It's everywhere." I jumped out of bed, running to get my tablet. With trembling hands, I accessed social media. What I saw made my blood run cold. Leonardo had published a long text claiming to have been the victim of a cruel setup by a psychotic mother-in-law who couldn't stand losing control over her daughter. He claimed that I had manipulated Julia her entire life, isolating her from relationships to maintain control over her and the bakery. Worse still, he had edited the recording I made, cutting parts and rearranging it so it seemed like he was only responding to his friend's provocations. The narrative he built painted me as a bitter, controlling, and calculating woman, and it worked. The comments were devastating. People took his side, calling me a monster, saying Julia had escaped a marriage that would further trap her in my toxic influence. "Mom, what's happening?" Julia appeared at my bedroom door, her eyes swollen from crying the night before. "My phone won't stop ringing." I looked at my daughter, her face still marked by the pain of the recent betrayal, and hesitated. She was already suffering too much. "Leonardo is spreading lies about us, honey. He edited the recording, twisted everything." Julia took the tablet from my hands and began to read, her face paling with each line. When she reached the comments, silent tears began to fall. "He's destroying our reputation," I murmured, feeling helpless. That same day, we received 3 more blows. A group of protesters appeared in front of the bakery with signs calling us abusers and manipulators. 2 large companies that bought our products called to cancel contracts. And worst of all, close friends began to avoid us, some even sending accusatory messages. For the next 10 days, the situation only worsened. Leonardo gave interviews to local blogs, appeared on a popular podcast, crying as he spoke about how he had been deceived by a family he truly loved. We tried to keep the bakery running, but customers drastically decreased. Employees started to resign, fearing being associated with the scandal. On the 12th day, Antonio appeared with alarming news. "Leonardo has filed a lawsuit against you. He's claiming moral damages, defamation, and breach of contract." "Breach of contract?" I asked incredulously. "What contract?" "He says there was a verbal agreement to make him a partner in the bakery after the wedding, and that you, Regina, deliberately sabotaged everything out of jealousy and control." "That's absurd." "Absurd, but dangerous," Antonio warned. He hired Marcelo Teixeira. My stomach sank. Marcelo Teixeira was one of the most aggressive lawyers in the city, known for turning simple cases into bloody media battles. That night, I called Elena Vasconcelos, a formidable lawyer I met years ago at a women's entrepreneurship event. Elena listened to our story, examined the evidence, and nodded gravely. "He's playing dirty, but he made mistakes. First, the editing of the recording is detectable by any expert. Second, his accusations are defamatory. Third, he has no proof of this supposed verbal agreement." Elena set up a 2-pronged strategy, judicial and public. We filed a countersuit for defamation and moral damages. Simultaneously, she hired a crisis management company. It was Julia who had the idea. What if we pretended one of our suppliers accepted the proposal? We could record the conversation when Leonardo gives specific instructions. Elena considered for a moment, then smiled. That could work, but we need to be extremely careful. Gustavo, our organic fruit supplier, agreed to participate. Elena prepared everything to ensure the recording was legal and admissible in court. The meeting would be at a public cafe. Gustavo would wear a court-approved recorder hidden in his shirt pocket. The next day, Gustavo called. "It's done. I have everything recorded." Not only did he admit to orchestrating a boycott, but he also said things. Now, you'll hear them. An hour later, we met in Elena's office to listen to the recording. The quality was excellent, every word clearly audible. Carlos talks too much, but yes, I'm funding part of his expansion in exchange for some strategic collaborations. like taking suppliers away from Julia Sabore's bakery. A cold laugh echoed on the recording. Exactly. That bakery has to disappear, and with it, the arrogance of those two. May I ask why this interest in destroying them? It's personal. Regina Almeida humiliated me, manipulated my fiancé against me. Nobody does that to me and gets away with it. Nobody. Julia's stomach made an audible sound of disgust as she heard those words. But the most pathetic thing is how she pretended not to see that I was only interested in the money. Who would be interested in a fat crybaby like her if not for the money? When the recording ended, the silence in the office was heavy. Julia had tears in her eyes, but not of sadness, of pure rage. "Do we have enough?" I asked Elena. She nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. More than enough. The next morning, Elena called a press conference. She carefully selected fragments of the recording that would show Leonardo's true intentions without exposing the cruelest insults against Julia. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The same media outlets that had attacked us were now rushing to publish the truth. Former clients began to contact us, expressing support. Social media was filled with messages of solidarity. Carlos Mendonza, owner of Sweet Dreams, issued an official statement distancing himself from Leonardo and apologizing. But the final blow came 3 days later when a high-audience blog published an explosive report. 2 of Leonardo's ex-girlfriends came forward to tell stories similar to ours. Leonardo tried to defend himself, claiming the recording had been manipulated, but it was too late. The tide had completely turned. 2 weeks after the press conference, we received a settlement proposal. Leonardo would drop all accusations if we dropped ours. "He's desperate," Elena observed. "His image is destroyed. Clients are abandoning his consulting firm." "Should we accept?" I asked, looking at Julia, leaving the decision in her hands. My daughter shook her head firmly. "No. He tried to destroy us, not just financially, but emotionally. I want him to face all legal consequences." The lawsuit continued. 3 months later, the judge delivered his verdict. Leonardo was convicted of defamation, malicious interference with business relations, and harassment. He was ordered to pay substantial damages, in addition to publicly retracting his statements. The bakery slowly began to recover. Clients returned, new contracts were signed. The road would be long, but we were back. One afternoon, while Julia and I were working in the kitchen, testing a new recipe, she broke the silence. "Mom, did you ever wonder how long it would have taken for me to discover the truth if I had married him?" I looked at my daughter, concentrating as she precisely measured ingredients. "I don't know, honey. Maybe days, maybe years. The important thing is that now we know." "Sometimes I think I should be grateful I overheard that conversation on our wedding day," she continued without looking at me. "But other times, I feel like I should have trusted you immediately without needing proof." I gently touched her face, turning it towards me. "Julia, you loved him. Love sometimes blinds. Don't blame yourself for doubting." She smiled sadly. "I guess I learned the hard way that not everyone deserves our heart." "It's a tough lesson," I agreed, "but you survived, we survived, and we came out stronger." Julia's Flavors Bakery transformed into a chain with 4 locations. Julia was in her last semester of her master's degree in business management, implementing new strategies that had increased our efficiency by 30%. We gradually began to step back from daily operations, relying on Julia and the talented team we had assembled. We wrote a book about our story, Sweet Revenge, How I Saved My Daughter and Our Business from a Swindler. It became a modest success, especially among entrepreneurial women and single mothers. Leonardo, we learned through others, had left town after the trial. His consulting firm went bankrupt. The last we heard was that he was working as a salesperson at a used car dealership. One evening, after a book launch event, Julia and I returned home exhausted but satisfied. We sat on the terrace with cups of tea, watching the stars. "You know what's strange, Mom?" Julia reflected. "If I had married Leonardo, today I would be considered a successful woman by conventional standards." "And you?" I completed softly. "Deeply," she agreed, taking a sip of tea. I've been thinking a lot about standards of success, how they teach us from a young age that marriage is the great goal. I nodded, understanding perfectly. You know what else I learned from all this? She continued. That true relationships are partnerships, not transactions. Leonardo saw me as a means to an end. You always saw me as a complete person, worthy of love and respect. Tears welled up in my eyes. You've always been my greatest pride, Julia, from the very first moment. That's why I've decided something. She straightened up. I'm going to get a master's degree in business management. I want to expand the bakery. And yes, someday I will get married, have children, but it will be because I want to, not because I need validation. I squeezed her hand, my heart overflowing with pride. You will be amazing in everything you choose to do. That night, looking at the stars, I realized that Leonardo had given us an involuntary gift, clarity. He showed us that true love is not blind, but sees clearly and chooses to love anyway. And that sometimes protecting those we love means making the most difficult decisions, even when it might cost us everything. And you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have told your daughter the truth immediately or waited for more proof?
Leave your comment below telling us what part of the story impacted you the most. Have you ever experienced a similar situation? What would you do differently? If this story touched your heart, leave your like so more people can see it. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss the next stories. Share with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment from which city or country you are watching. We love to know how far our stories reach. Thank you for being here. Your presence and support mean everything to us. See you in the next video. Until then, remember, trust your instincts, protect those you love, and never let anyone diminish your worth. A big hug.